Hello, good morning. Members, officers and any members of the public who are viewing the live stream, welcome to this meeting of South Cambridgeshire District Council's Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Martin Khan and I'm chair of the committee. We would also like to welcome planning apprentices from South Bank who are watching the proceedings in the public gallery. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their camera and microphone remain off unless they are addressing the committee. If anyone has any questions on how the proceedings of this meeting work, please ask now and the Democratic Services will advise. Committee members present in the chamber, I will now invite each of you to introduce yourselves. Members, after I call your name, please turn on your microphone and say your name so that your presence may be noted. As I said earlier, my name is Councillor Martin Khan and I'm member for Histon and Imbington Ward. My vice chair is Councillor Peter Fane.
Good morning, members. Peter Fane, Shelford Ward.
Councillor Ariel Khan.
Councillor Ariel Khan, member of Harston and Cumberton Ward.
Councillor Bill Handley.
Good morning, everybody. Bill Handley. I'm the member for the villages of Over and Willingham.
Councillor Jeff Harvey.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, I'm Jeff Harvey. I'm the Councillor for Borsham Ward.
Councillor Toomey Hawkins. Dr. Toomey Hawkins.
Good morning, everyone. Toomey Hawkins, member for Caldecote Ward.
Councillor Judith Rippeth.
Good morning, Councillor Judith Rippeth, one of the members for Milton and Waterbeach Ward.
Councillor Peter Sandford.
Good morning, everyone. Peter Sandford, one of the members for Caxton and Papworth Ward.
Councillor Heather Williams.
Morning, Chair. Morning, all. Heather Williams, and I represent the Mordens Ward.
Councillor Dr. Richard Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. Richard Williams. I represent the Whittlesford Ward.
Councillor Eileen Wilson.
Good morning. Eileen Wilson, Councillor for Cottenham Ward.
I can confirm that the meeting is quorate. We have some officers with us in the chamber for the duration of the meeting. Rebecca Smith, Area Development Manager.
Morning, Chair.
Richard Pitt, Principal Planning Lawyer. Okay, Lawrence to Mary Holman, Democratic Services Officer. You see? Is Lawrence here or he's online? Okay. And we have our technical support for the Democratic Services being provided by Aaron Clark.
Morning. Thank you, Chair.
We'll also be joined by various case officers throughout the meeting. If at any time a member leaves the meeting, would they please make that fact known so that it can be recorded in the minutes? We should take breaks from this meeting as and when they are needed and are appropriate. Members should have received the main agenda pack dated 5th of September and the plans pack online supplement dated 6th of September. I would also like to note that a site visit was conducted on Tuesday, 12th of September for item 6, Caxton. Item 2 on our agenda today is apologies for absence. Lawrence, are there any apologies for absence today, please? We can't hear you, Lawrence. Can we sort out the problem?
Sorry, is this on my end or in the chamber?
We can hear you now. We can hear you now, Lawrence. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. No apologies for absence today.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Members, now we come to item 3, declarations of interest. I personally have a declaration of interest for item number 5. I will be leaving the meeting because I asked for this application to be referred to committee and the chair will be taken by Councillor Peter Fane, proposing that we Councillor Peter Sandford acts as vice chair, but that's up for you to decide.
No, I think Councillor Bill Handley.
Oh, it's Bill. Sorry. Councillor Bill. So I will be drawing for that item. And okay, Councillor Bill Handley, you have. Sorry, Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just need to declare an interest in relation to agenda item 8. One of the applicants is a customer of my husband's, but I've had no contact. There's no pecuniary interest, so it's a noting item.
Councillor Eileen Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I was on the original committee for agenda item 5, but I come to the matter afresh.
I'll just say ditto to that one, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Peter Sanford.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to item 6, the land east of Ermine Street in Caxton, I am one of the local members. I had discussions about the planning process with the Parish Council Chair. However, I have not yet formed an opinion on the merits of the application and will be coming to today's discussion with an open mind.
Okay. Councillor Judith Rippers.
I also have an interest in agenda item 5 in that I was on that committee back in 2018, but I come to the matter afresh.
Councillor Ariel Khan.
My father is speaking as a local member on agenda item 5, but we have not spoken about it at all, so I'm coming to
Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. Item 4 on our agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting, and we have minutes of the meeting held on 9th of August. Do any members wish to make any amendments to these minutes? Councillor Heather Williams.
Just simply, Chair, that I wasn't present, so I'll abstain from any vote.
Okay. Can I take approval of these minutes by... Oh, sorry. Councillor Judith Rippers.
Again, ditto. I wasn't here at that meeting, so I abstain.
Okay. Can I take approval of these minutes by affirmation?
I propose that we do.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Sorry. I wasn't at the meeting, so I will abstain. Okay. Item 5. Sir?
I was also not at the meeting, so I'll abstain.
Thank you. Item 5. As explained, I'm withdrawing from this during this application and will present my comments as local member. Councillor Peter Fain, Vice Chair, will now take the chair and I will leave the room. Okay. Oh, yes, that's right. So, Peter, before we start, can we do the Rebecca's wants to do an update on the National Planning Framework. I think that's the point to do it, and then I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to let you know that the Planning Officer's reports on the agenda all contain references to the previous iteration of the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework. It was updated last week on the 5th. The update reflects the ministerial statements in regards to the changes on planning policy for onshore wind turbines. We've reviewed the changes that were made in the update to the NPPF and we're confident that none of the changes impact or affect the reports and how we would consider the applications on committee today. So I just wanted to provide an update.
So, as agreed, members, I will take the chair. We will need to approve a temporary vice chair for this item, and I would propose, I think it's agreed that Councillor... Oh, seconded, right. Councillor Bill Handley will take over. Seconded, proposal agreed. Thank you. Right. So we come to the next item, which is item number 5, I think. Yes, item number 5. Land to the west of Neil Drive, or West Neil Drive, rather, in Orchard Park. This is a section 73 application, that is to vary a condition number 2, in an application S4191/19/FL, which we approved previously. This involves the removal of the underground car parking, associated structures, reduction in the length and depth of the new blocks, with internal alterations, alterations to the apartment mix, reduction in the amount of internal communal space, alterations to the cycle storage, an increase in the number of electric vehicle charging points, alterations to the above-ground car parking, including an increase in the number of car club spaces, together with external landscape alterations. As mentioned earlier, this was called in by Councillor Khan and also by the Orchard Park Community Council. The key issues are related to transport and parking, viability and affordable housing, and design and landscape. And the presenting officer is Michael Hammond. The recommendation is to approve, subject to conditions and deed of variation. So I'll call on Michael Hammond to present the application.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Looks like it's up there, yep. So, as you mentioned, Chair, the application is a Section 73 application to vary condition number 2 of the 2019 permission, which got permission for 80 studio, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments on land to the west of Neil Drive, Orchard Park. And I'll talk through the changes from the previous application to this one in turn. So the site is located at sort of the northern end of Orchard Park, adjacent to the A14, which is to the north. To the east, bear with me, I will use a pointer. To the east is a plot of land that currently has a planning application on it for a hotel and a part hotel. That hasn't been determined yet, and that's pending consideration. To the west is the Travel Lodge building, and then immediately to the south there are some residential properties. So at a more zoomed out scale, got Piston, Impington, it's catching up now, yep, to the northwest. To the south is the city of Cambridge. See the border with South Cambridgeshire effectively runs along King Hedges Road here. To the east is Cambridge Science Park. And Histon Road runs down here, which has a cycle link into the city centre. So obviously there's been an Orchard Park Design Guide, SPD, that was adopted in 2011, which sets out the different parcels of land to be developed in Orchard Park. This plot in here is part of COM4, which is in here. The majority of the other plots have been developed or in the process of being developed now. So this is the street view image looking to the west. So up here on the right is the A14 barrier for context, looking across the site towards the Travel Lodge. And then this is looking from the southwest. So, as you went through, Chair, the proposed changes between the previously approved plans and what would be these plans are the removal of an underground car parking element, which would result in a reduction in 21 spaces. The ground surface level would be reconfigured to accommodate some of that parking that would be lost in the basement, but not all of it. The length and depth of the new blocks would be amended in terms of their scale and massing, particularly Block A, the westernmost block, would be pulled back to the north. The apartment mix would be amended, effectively reducing the number of 2 beds, so there predominantly would be now studios. The internal arrangements would be changed slightly to accommodate cycle parking internally. And that cycle store to the north, which I'll go through, has been reduced in size as a result of that. More EV charging spaces are proposed. The, again, the above ground car parking arrangement has been amended, and 2 car club spaces are proposed off-site on the plans, but we'd be seeking for those to be secured on-site for a Section 96 agreement. That's out in the report. And then just general external landscape alterations as a result of those changes. So I've done a comparison. So on the left is the approved block plan, on the right is the proposed. I believe this works. Yep. So I pointed out the key changes. So as mentioned, that cycle parking store, previously it's where these red dots are in here, was a much larger structure. It's now proposed to be a smaller structure. And then the footprint and massing changes. So the main change is this block A reduction over here, which then allows for car parking to be extended into this area. As mentioned, yeah, that landscape area has been amended, whereas previously it was all landscape. There's a path that still is retained as part of this, running between Neil Drive and Chifton Way. But yeah, that arrangement will be changed. And again, that cycle parking reduced. Sorry, it catches up on this one. So this was where the basement car park entrance was going to be. So there'd be a lift that went down to the basement. That's now been removed. Again, cycle parking moved internally within the building. This landscaping area, you'll see, has changed as a result of that footprint being reduced and trying to accommodate more car parking at surface level. There isn't much in terms of obvious comparisons. The main one is that it's been reduced by 6 metres, block A. So previously it was around 39 metres and now it's around 33 metres. And this upper floor element of block B has been increased slightly. You'll see there. It previously didn't extend as far out. So that 6 metre gap effectively has been increased between the site and the residential dwellings, even to the south. So previously it was around 10.8 metres and now it's 16.8. So as mentioned, there was a basement plan. There obviously isn't a comparison one now because they're not proposing one. But again, there was underground car parking before. These are comparisons of the floor plans. Again, that basement car park has been removed. And you'll see that the footprint of the building has been altered slightly. For example, now it's more sort of straight edges, whereas previously it was cantilevered. But generally, the footprint and massing is very similar. And again, that cycle parking has come internally now. There aren't too many changes to point out at the upper floor levels. Again, it's mainly straightening off of edges, for example, here. The link between the two blocks at second floor and above is still maintained as part of this. And similarly at third floor level. At the upper floor, there was that element of massing that I pointed out earlier. It's been increased slightly on block B here. So that's the main change on this elevation, this floor plan, sorry. So in terms of planning balance, the principal development has been approved under the extant permission. There's an improved sustainability performance of the development by way of the removal of the basement car park and a reduction in the amount of embodied carbon as a result of that. There's a reduction in physical mass and footprint, which we feel enhances the appearance of the building itself. And the amended design does not harm neighbour amenity. In terms of potential harm, there, as you will note, landscape and urban design have pointed out some potential harm in terms of the landscaping arrangement, particularly in that southwest corner that was pointed out earlier. And then there's sort of third-party comments and comments made by the council regarding the reduction in the amount of car parking and potential impact this has on street parking pressure. However, the transport assessment team at the county council have been consulted and based on a similar permission at Topper Street in Orchard Park, comfortable that the provision of 2 car club spaces would help to offset this. So therefore, the officer recommendation is approval, subject to conditions, and a deed of variation to the original Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that presentation. Now, we do have an opportunity to ask any questions of clarification for our officer here, and I would stress that if you have questions of clarification, it would be better to ask them now than to seek to ask them of our speakers later. I think we have Councillor Heather Williams first.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify around cycle, because obviously it looks sort of smaller, so because it's becoming inside more, there's no sort of reflection on volume in relation to the cycle storage. Because it looks like a massive reduction, but that's one of my inquiries.
Through you, Chair, could I ask for clarification? When you say volume, is that the external store or the internal store capacity? Yeah, there is a slight reduction. I think it's mentioned in my committee report. I think it's 2 spaces. Technically, it's lower than what was approved. However, it's pertinent to note that the mix of dwellings now previously had more 2-beds, whereas now we've got more studios. So the actual demand on those spaces is kind of compensated for in that respect. So there is a capacity reduction, yes, but the mix has changed.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And could you clarify, obviously there's a lot more studios this time, and looking at the site history, obviously there was an application for student rooms that was refused. Are you confident that if this was to be approved, there are sufficient conditions to ensure that this doesn't become student accommodation?
Through you, Chair, there wouldn't be a condition that, for example, restricts it to not be used by students, but if it was to, they'd need to apply for planning permission for a change of use if they decided to turn it into student accommodation. But I'd imagine as part of that, they would need to provide, for example, communal facilities or things like that. So they'd need to reapply for planning permission if they want to change it into student accommodation. That would be the mechanism we'd use to secure it rather than a condition, because it's a different use class. But
Another go. Come on, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair, for indulging me. So just to make sure that I'm clear on mind, so it can't officially be student accommodation without planning permission, but they would be free to rent it out to students if they so wish. Is that what I've heard?
yes.
Okay, I think that is clear. Now, forgive me, I may have got the order wrong here, but I'm going to call Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins next.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. The parking was a main issue when this was first considered, and now we have an application in front of us that's planning to reduce that number significantly. I actually visited the site yesterday evening to see what parking is like, and there were some cars already parked, like in front of the building just before you get to the site. So it seems to me that the assessment that's been done by the county team, I haven't seen any evidence that providing 2 club car spaces will replace losing, what, 21 parking spaces? Especially when car ownership in Orchard Park is higher than, the other areas closer to it in Cambridge. So it seems to me there's, how can we accept the assessment that reducing by so many parking spaces will not cause more problems further down the line?
Through you, Chair, I mean, that is a valid material consideration that you would need to consider. All I can stress is that we've consulted the County Council. I guess the key material change between perhaps when you last considered this and this one is that Topper Street application that's referred to, that was where the 2 car club spaces came in to offset that demand. I don't have the stats immediately to hand to say exactly what the difference is between the 2 in terms of what a car club space would do. I could look for that in the background whilst perhaps speakers are talking, but yeah, like I said, we're led ultimately by the County Council Transport Assessment Team in that regard.
Thank you, if I may, Chair. I appreciate that. It's just it would have been good if they'd given us that evidence. There isn't any evidence. And the practicalities of what's happening in Orchard Park now means that it's potentially going to be an issue we're going to have to come back with. I mean, they've asked for Section 106 to, make changes to avoid parking on the space. But what about the actual parking when people need to park? Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins, I think this is clearly going to be a matter for debate. It's a matter that the public speakers may also wish to address. Mr. Hammond has kindly offered to have a look at the background data, and perhaps after we've heard from the public speakers, it might just give us a little bit more detail as to how the county assessment team came to that view. I think it's important that in that we consider that if there are 26 car parking spaces plus the 2 extra spaces for the car club, how those spaces might be allocated, and if there are additional cars, if more of the occupiers have cars, where those might be parked, what implication. Perhaps we could come back to that later. Now, I have other questioners. I think Councillor Dr. Richard Williams was next.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got, I think, 3 points. The first is it would be helpful if the case officer could say a little bit about the Section 73 issue, which is referenced in the report and is referenced by the Parish Council, specifically the fact that this is coming forward as a Section 73 application, as an amendment, when there are some fairly quite significant changes to the application. So I think I would certainly welcome just a bit of clarification that we're confident that this is okay as a Section 73 application. On the parking, picking up a point that Councillor Hawkins made, actually, it would be useful, I think, for me to get a bit more clarification from the officer, maybe that will come later, about exactly what the county team has said, because the report at paragraph 930 on page 29 notes that the county team says that the provision of the carpool, or the car club rather, could reduce demand. But actually, if you read paragraph 614, it concludes with the county team saying the car club industry is still fairly new to Cambridge, and so there is not enough local evidence to support the assumption that 2 car club spaces would reduce 24. So actually, it seems that there is no evidence for that, and the county team is actually saying they don't know. So I think a bit of clarification on precisely what's meant by 930 would be helpful. And then one final point, just on housing mix. Obviously, we've got policy H9, which is talked about at page 37 of the report. I mean, this quite clearly doesn't comply with policy H9, but that conclusion isn't really drawn. I know that, but it's quite way off policy H9. So I think just a bit of clarification on why you think there's no conflict there, if that's the case. And then finally, paragraph 9.95. This is on the build to rent housing. It says the 9.95 says the proposal for build to rent housing would provide a different type of accommodation that is not currently highly available in the district. I'd be interested in the evidence for that.
Thank you. Before we ask Mr. Hammond to reply to that, can I just remind members we're just seeking questions of clarification. Some of these points he may be able to help us with, some of them are for us to debate later on when we reach that section. But Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll try and take them in turn. So in terms of a section 73, I mean, I'll refer to paragraph 9.4 of the committee report. On this page 25 of the committee pack, so it says, planning practice guidance advises that there is no statutory definition of a minor material amendment, which is section 73 application, but it's likely to include in the amendment where its scale and or nature results development that is not substantially different from the one that has been approved, and then it refers to case law. Essentially, the description of development as originally approved was quite generic. It was 80 apartments, and they're still proposing 80 apartments. So I think that's would be what I'd go to for that, is that it's not changing the description of development that was originally approved. Your next point was about car club spaces, paragraph 9.7. 70. Sorry, 9.7. Sorry, could you, sorry, Councillor Williams, could you remind me of the paragraph number you reference?
Yeah, it was 9.30, and then I was referring back to 6.14, where the county team said that there was no evidence actually to support the assumption that 2 car club spaces would reduce demand by 24 spaces.
Yeah, thank you. It might be a case of, similar to my point to Councillor Hawkins earlier, me perhaps investigating that in the background, perhaps while speakers are talking, to see if they've got the evidence, because, like I said, this is what the county council have said to us in their response, so that's where that originated from. In terms of the policy H9 mix, whilst, yes, there are a lot of studios as a proportion in this one, we have consulted the housing team who don't have an objection to the mix proposed, and I know the policy does make exceptions for this. Whilst I appreciate perhaps it is quite heavily weighted to the studio side, like I said, the housing team are okay with it, so we're sort of led by their expert opinion on that. I'm sure if they had an objection about that mix, they would have pointed that out to us, so that would be my response to that. But yeah, I think it would be a case of me, looking in the background to try and get more into this transport matter. That's okay. Thank you.
That would be very helpful, thank you. Councillor Eileen Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about the compressed cycle parking outside. How has it become compressed? Is it a different type of stand, or? I've also got another question.
Okay. Just for clarification, so is that the external storage? Yeah. It's become compressed because they've essentially moved a significant amount of that cycle storage internally within the main building of Block B. That's the reason the actual store has got compressed, yes.
My second question was about the parking. Is there any disabled parking? Are there any disabled parking spaces? And would this affect the overall availability of parking for people who don't use disabled parking spaces?
Through Chair, yes, there are disabled car parking spaces. I'm just trying to get the site plan up because it might help. Bear with me. I'll just share my screen again. So there are there were 4, so there's 2 disabled car parking spaces outside Block A here, which hopefully my mouse is hovering over. So the 26 that are within the site include 2 disabled spaces, so there's 24 other spaces, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Could you keep that up, because, forgive me, Councillor Rippeth, I think Councillor Bill Handley wanted to ask a related question.
Thank you. Can you tell us how many EV charging points are proposed?
I believe it's 10. It's in the committee report. Actually, it might even be somewhere in the amendments. I'm sure it's 10. Yeah, I'll come back if it's different, but it's 10. Yeah.
Right. Lastly, I think, second but lastly, questions. Councillor Judith Rippeth, and then I'll come back to Councillor Dr. Jimmy Hawkins after that.
My point's been clarified by the other questions.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Jimmy Hawkins, clearly yours hasn't.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. Just back to cycling. Will the stands be suitable for cargo bikes?
Just bear with me, I'll just get the floor plans up because that will probably be the best indicator. So looking at the plan, my initial reaction is no, they won't, but I mean, the agent or applicant might be able to clarify as well if they're speaking, but based on this layout, it's predominantly Sheffield stands. So unless there was some way, I mean, it could be dealt with by way of condition potentially if we wanted to rearrange the cycle parking layout internally to allow for it. There appears to be room there to do it, but as it stands, no, there's not.
Right, I think that concludes our questions of clarification. I'll now move on to the public speakers. We're glad to welcome Paul Harney of Paul Harney Associates, if you'd like to come to the stand. Mr. Harney, thank you for joining us. You probably know the procedure. You'll need to press the red button. You'll then have 3 minutes. I appreciate that there have been a lot of questions of clarification asked that you may wish to address. And if when you've finished, you want some more time to address those questions, I'm sure we can accommodate that. But for the moment, you have 3 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. This application seeks amendments to the approved scheme for 80 build-to-rent apartments at Neil Drive. The main changes are the removal of underground car parking and alterations to the above-ground parking layout, the provision of an additional car club space, an increased number of EV charging points, a reduction in the length of the flat blocks. Having considered these changes in the context of the Council's adopted planning policies and guidance, officers recommend planning permission is granted. No objections are raised to the removal of the underground car park or the reduction in the number of parking spaces by the transport team or the Highways Development Management team. The provision of 26 spaces proposed is exactly the same dwelling to parking ratio recently permitted by the District Council in respect of a similar build-to-rent proposal at Topper Street, also within Orchard Park and just 250 metres east of the site. We note that the Community Council did not object to or speak against that application. The parking ratio is also based on evidence of parking demand at other build-to-rent schemes within the Cambridge area and nationally. For example, a recent development on Huntingdon Road of 68 one-bedroom apartments at a similar distance to the city centre has only 9 residents who own or have use of a car. The underground car park is therefore not required, and its removal alongside other changes will deliver important sustainability advantages. As noted in the officer's report, construction would involve much less embedded carbon and so overall a greatly reduced carbon footprint. And energy use will be significantly reduced over the lifetime of the buildings. The additional car club space will encourage more car sharing, reducing the need for occupants to own their own car. The increased EV charging points will encourage occupants who do own their cars to feel able to switch to electric vehicles. It is recognised that there will be a small reduction in the amount of soft landscaping. For clarity, this is just 33 square metres, down from 558 to 525 square metres. This is only 6% overall. However, the quality of the landscaping will be enhanced with more surface level planting, and the hard planting containers originally proposed above the underground car park structure are no longer required. As set out in the officer's report, the proposals retain the green strips at the site entrance with tree planting to create a green and verdant feel, provide a landscape green wedge to the southwest corner, include tree buffer planting to the southern boundary, and provide good quality planting around the apartments to create a soft setting to the built form. We therefore hope that the committee will support the officer's recommendation and resolve to grant planning permission to enable these changes. Thank you. And I would appreciate being able to answer any questions that you have, particularly those that were raised about car parking standards in respect of build to rent, and also about the question on student accommodation.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Harney. Just before we do that, I know that Councillor Heather Williams has, I think, an additional question or two. Is this, if members want to put the same questions of clarification they put earlier on, then I'm sure Mr. Harney will have taken note of them and we could perhaps be brief on that. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I asked my question of the officer and I've had the officer's response, so that's not my question, it's something different. Through yourself, Chair, the applicant has made reference to lots of different applications and referred to the Orchard Park Community Council and their responses. Could I just ensure and seek clarification that the applicant understands that each application is decided on its own merits and that the Orchard Park Community Council, as are we, are able to make a decision on each application, and therefore if he would like to contribute anything in relation to the objections that have been raised by officers of this council in other matters, I would welcome it. But I think that should be understood, Chair. I just want to make sure it is.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I suspect that may be what would be regarded as a rhetorical question, to which the answer yes would probably suffice, but I don't want to anticipate how Mr. Harney might want to respond to that.
Yes, the reason I raised the case, it was only an application quite recently on Topper Street, which is just round the corner from our site in Orchard Park, with exactly the same parking matters raised by the applicant at that time. And exactly the same conclusion reached by the Highway Authority that's determined why our application has come forward in this way. We've to some extent been led by that application and by that approval about the calculation of car parking. So I think it's reasonable for me to raise that, because it would seem a little unreasonable to have almost an identical situation almost next door to us being approved on similar evidence, whereas was refused on the same evidence. Basically.
Yes, thank you.
That's mine.
And let me just stress that we will be hearing shortly from Victoria McNeil, who's the clerk to the Orchard Park Community Association, who can no doubt make any points for herself. Now, members had the opportunity to ask questions for clarification earlier on, a number of which Mr. Hammond is going to come back to about later after the public speakers. Do any members want any questions or clarification specifically to Mr. Harney? Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins wants to ask you one, and then Mr. Harney, I will give you a moment to deal with some of the questions that were asked earlier that you may not have had a chance to address yet. Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Chair. Two things. First is on the cycle parking. Are you planning on making any availability for cargo bikes? Because there's a lot more of those being used in Cambridge these days.
Repeat the question, Councillor Hawkins.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Are you making cycle parking available for cargo bikes?
The spaces we have is the same as the previous application in terms of the type and quantity, but we can introduce cargo bike parking as the planning officer said. There is room for that, so I'd be happy for that to be conditioned, that some element of cargo parking bikes are there. But we look particularly at the demographic of the residents there when we're considering that, but we're happy to provide them if required.
Thank you. We will, of course, be considering whether to approve the application as submitted, but it's helpful to know that there is some flexibility there. Now, Mr. Harney, it's unusual for me to ask you to address questions that were addressed to others, but I do it merely to save time, to avoid members having to repeat questions. And if you would keep your answers as brief as you can and related directly to the questions that were put earlier on, that would be helpful.
Yes, I just have two, really. I think the officer dealt with the rest. The site already has an extant consent for student accommodation for 138 student rooms. That is an extant consent. So I thought it would be good to point that out. I think also as regards in parking, build to rent, there's been an awful lot of studies on build to rent and the demographic, the age group of people who live in that accommodation and car ownership. And it's quite an important factor. I mean, we've developed one recently in Cambridge where there are 68 apartments. We provided 30 spaces, but there are only 9 residents for a fully occupied block of flats who actually have cars. And that is quite typical of the build-to-rent demographic. And I thought I ought to point that out as well. So far, we've over-provided for car parking on the sites that we have developed in the past.
Thank you, that's very helpful, and thank you for your presentation. So next I'm going to call on, I think we have with us Victoria McNeil, Clerk to the Orchard Park Community Council. Is Victoria McNeil? Welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
I think you know the rules. You will have 3 minutes. Can I just ask you before then whether you have the specific consent of the Community Association to represent them on these matters?
Yes, I do, Chair. Councillor Chan, the chair of the organisation, would have been here but has been caught up on another meeting, so he's asked me to represent the Community Council.
Understood. Thank you very much for that. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Those members who were on the planning committee when the original application was submitted 5 years ago will recall that adequacy of parking was a huge issue for residents. Parking problems have got worse at Orchard Park since then, with the increase in HMOs and the increase seemingly in car ownership. The Community Council recognises the need to reduce car ownership, but a shortage of dedicated parking spaces in Orchard Park has already led to residents parking all over the place. There is an existing safety problem for children walking to school, for cyclists, for wheelchair mobility scooter users, and other walkers generally. By removing a substantial amount of the parking provision, 21 spaces, in what is already a problem area of parking due to the density and housing and car ownership. And in this regard, it is a little different from Topper Street and the arrangements at the far end of Topper Street, which Mr. Harney referred to as being almost identical, and they're not. But the density, particular density here of housing and car ownership, safety is compromised. Parents won't want their children walking or cycling in Orchard Park if it's clogged with on-street parking. And I think this would surely run counter to the council's aims to get more people walking and cycling, and would therefore militate against one of the things that the officer said was in favour of approval, which was the claimed improvement in sustainability. I think this would have a counterproductive effect. The Community Council lastly doesn't believe this to be a minor material amendment. If the developer wishes to pursue this change, we believe it should at least be the subject of a new, fully consulted upon application. It is substantially different from the original application. Planning policy guidance states an amendment would be considered a minor material amendment if its scale and nature results in a development which is not substantially different from that has been approved. And I submit that this is substantially different from what has been approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As before, if members have questions of clarification which have not been dealt with earlier, then there is an opportunity now to ask Mrs. McNeill. No. Mrs. McNeill, the point you raise about whether this is appropriate for a 73 application, as we call it, or whether this should be a new application, inevitably the committee will take advice from our officers on that. And I would ask either Mr. Hammond or possibly Mr. Pitt to comment further on that before we progress.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Michael actually covered this, but it was quite a recent case in the High Court, Armstrong, where the test was, just bear with me.
Sorry to spring this one on you, but I think it's rather a crucial point that we need to address.
So the High Court stated that the wording in the PPG caused a bit of confusion because it refers to minor material amendment, and there was nothing in section 73 of the Act, so that's where there's a conflict between the planning guidance and the legislation, that limits applications to minor material amendments. And there was this chap, Armstrong, who appealed against the decision of local authority to turn down his application where there was just for one dwelling. He amended various plans. He wasn't building any more than one dwelling, and the High Court basically said quash the decision of the inspector to refuse the appeal because it didn't change the operative part of the planning permission. So basically the fundamental principle of the permission was the same. He wasn't building 20 houses or something like that. I mean, to an extent, it's in the eye of the decision maker as to what each person would deem to be minor. Obviously, there's something that Michael's decided is minor, but that's caused a conflict with the objectors. So, yeah, we are that case law to an extent has clarified that actually it's quite broad what could qualify as a minor material amendment.
Thank you for that. So just to sum up, you are satisfied that it is correct to consider this as a Section 73 application to an existing?
It could not be considered reasonable to refuse it on the basis of, it was predicated on a Section 73, it would be unreasonable and liable to challenge if the council did that.
Sorry, Rebecca, you want to comment on this as well?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify that actually a Section 73 application is fully consulted on, the same as a full planning application. So there is no difference in the level of consultation in terms of statutory, neighbour or any other consultees.
That's very helpful, thank you. Mrs. McNeil, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And now I think the local member, Councillor Dr. Martin Khan, is going to speak to us. I think he's just about to join us again. Councillor Khan, I think we can assume you know how this committee works. So the floor is yours for the usual. 3 minutes would be preferred as the local member.
Okay. It's been accepted that on the basis of the original approval that this site can accept up to 80 units of privately rented housing, which due to viability concerns would not include any affordable housing. Originally it was accepted on this site due to the nature of the tenure. There would need to be 47 parking spaces in the implementation of a car club scheme. And I checked on the minutes of the original application to confirm this. On the basis of this present application, which assumes that each car club scheme space would displace 12 car parking spaces, there would be 46 places plus 12. This equates to 58 car parking spaces for 80 units. With a car club's scheme with a minimum of 1 car. This Section 73 application proposes that this be reduced to 24 car parking spaces plus 2 car club spaces, on which basis this would equate to 48 car parking spaces, a reduction of 10 spaces. These views of parking and affordable housing in Orchard Park were major issues in the Neil Drive and L2 applications. I confirm from my own experience that the problems of parking in the evenings are really significant in Orchard Park, especially so on those parts of the quarter to the west where the development is higher. It appears to be lower to the east of the quarter, where a large development at Marmalade Lane of co-housing consisting of residents committed to a very environmentally aware lifestyle has a large car share scheme and sufficient on-site parking, thus reducing pressure on Topper Street in front of the L2 scheme, which also adjoins Marmalade Lane. In considering the planning balance, there was a major difference between the two schemes. The Neil Drive application had no provision for affordable housing. The L2 scheme, promoted by Cambridge Investment Partnership, in which the City Council has an interest, included 40% of social housing. Therefore, social housing, I emphasise, which is cheaper than, which is lower rents than affordable housing. Therefore, the issues involved here are basically that the Neil Drive and L2 schemes cannot be considered equivalent. Firstly, the L2 scheme includes 40% social, mainly one-bedroom units. These will include those who are in housing need and will include people with limited resources, including many older single persons, and including those not working who are less likely to possess or have need for a car. and for whom most trips will be to the city centre for services they need, a link that is well served by public transport. These are likely to be a different clientele to those renting the studio units at Neil Drive, and the remaining market one-bedroom and studio units at L2 were expected to be young workers up to the 30 age group, for many of whom a car will be necessary to get to work at places not directly served by public transport. The pressure on-street parking in the Neil Drive area is also likely to be higher due to the higher density of development and the lack of a highly sustainably minded community next door. Meanwhile, it is proposed to reduce the effective on-site parking there. Taking into account the lack of affordable housing at Neil Drive and the damage to the landscaping in the revised Neil Drive proposal, it is not in the least certain that the Neil Drive proposal, when the balance of both the reduction in effective parking and poorer landscaping is considered, would have been improved by committee in its revised form, and thus the revision cannot be considered a minor change. I would therefore suggest that in the context of what I have presented, the L2 application cannot be considered a precedent for the Neil Drive application, and recommend that the committee refuses the Section 73 application and requires any such amendment to be subject to a full application in which the parking or landscaping implications are fully considered afresh in the context of that application alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. I don't think it would be appropriate to ask any questions. I think Councillor Dr. Khan made his views very clear. And Dr. Khan will now leave us again for a while before resuming his seat in another role when we've concluded our debate and come to a decision on this application. Now, before I open this debate, we did ask Mr. Hammond a number of questions, and I know he's been devilling around for the answers, because I think committee members were reluctant to rely totally on assurances from the county team without a little bit more detail. And I think before we address other questions, let's hear from Mr. Hammond on the ones we put to him earlier.
Thank you, Chair. I'll share my screen because it might be helpful to have this up for your viewing as well. So there's two elements that I'll try and explain. One is how they've arrived at what the county think is the parking demand. Oh, sorry, make it bigger. Bear with me. That's not actually any bigger, is it? I'll try it. Yeah. Sorry.
Can't read.
Oh. Oh, it's this one. Yeah, yeah. There we go. Yeah, so as I was saying, there's two elements. There's the car parking demand and how they've arrived at what they think is the demand, and then how does this car club, how will the car club space offset 12 regular car parking spaces? So it's largely derived in terms of what they consider to be the parking demand from the 2011 census data. So there's effectively 3 areas that have been up for consideration. They're called superset layers in the census data. So the site obviously is most closely related to 006H in terms of its physical geography. It's within that. There's also 001, which is the established residential area, mainly of sort of King Hedges to the southeast. And then there's this 002 area, which is getting more towards the castle area into the city of Cambridge itself. So I'll show you this table, which basically explains it easier than that. So in the, I guess what you call the Orchard Park area, it says the average number of cars per flat is approximately 0.94. Now this was based for the Topper Street application, which was 75 dwellings. So it would be slightly higher than that for 80 units, as we've got in front of us. But you'll see that there's that area, there's the 001, which is the established King Hedges area, which has a lower parking demand of around 50. And then 002, which is getting into the more towards the city centre. Effectively, the more sustainable the location is becoming. The county council are of the view that this 001 number, which is what the, sorry, this little thing comes up, which is what within this application has been proposed. So they're saying that 0.63 average number of cars per flat for 80 units, that would equate to 50 parking spaces. They consider the argument put forward by the Asian applicant through the transport consultant is that since that 2011 census, the site has become a lot more sustainable, if you would, than when that census data was taken. In terms of, you've got things like the Histon Road cycling route coming in, for example, and they feel less car dependent, and that the county council are satisfied that using something akin to this, i.e. showing 50 spaces, is appropriate in this instance because of the fact it's quite later than the 2011 census. Appreciate that's quite a statty answer to give, but that's what the county council have seen, and that's what the county council have. They have no objection to that methodology. I can't speak for anything else about how the county council arrived at that, but they have no objection to this methodology. And if I could just clarify the car club spaces first before perhaps, the evidence behind that is this 2007-18 England and Wales Car Club survey produced by Como UK. That's what was being presented before, and again, the county council consider that to be reasonable, that one car club space takes off 12 regular spaces, and it's this evidence that has supported that. Again, it's the county council have assessed that. I haven't gone into this in great detail, but that's how they've arrived at those decisions. So that's all I can inform you, Chair, but hopefully that helps in some way, but I appreciate you might have more questions after this.
Yes, thank you for that. Now, members, I am keen to move on to the debate rather than take further questions, as long as we're satisfied that Mr. Hammond has, as I think he has, done everything he can to answer the questions we put to him earlier on. However, as members know, I'm easily persuaded. Councillor Dr. Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for indulging me. I do have one question. I'll keep it to one. I'll make my other point in debate just on that. We've just been presented data that the County Council, not the officer, but the County Council has relied on the Census 2011. Why haven't they relied on the Census 2021? There is detailed census data from 2021 for Orchard Park, which shows quite clearly that car ownership is higher in Orchard Park still in 2021 than in other areas. So my question is really, we can't rely on 2011 data. It's out of date. There's more up-to-date data available to us, which tells us something different.
Mr. Hammond, I think we would all understand if you can't answer for them in that matter. We appreciate you're doing your best to deal with a survey done by others. Just while you're looking into that, a point of information from Councillor Dr. Jimmy Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. Considering how important this matter is regarding the parking, why isn't the county council officers here, or at least available online, to answer our questions? Especially when they're using data that's like 12 years old.
Yes, I think that is in part a question for me, and I have to say to you straight out, I can't answer it, but I think this is a Section 73 application, not a full application, and so typically county officers would not be online. I assume there aren't any listening in to us. Councillor Dr. Heather Williams.
I appreciate the doctorate, but it hasn't been earned there, Chair. I'm not a doctor. I do have a degree. But
my apologies, nearly in a council.
I'll take the upgrade if it'll help. Sorry, that's put me off what I was going to say now. In light of what Councillor Dr. Jimmy Hawkins has said, and Councillor Dr. Richard Williams, I'm the only one long out on this sentence. Would it be, I would feel a lot more comfortable, and I mean this with no disrespect, given what we're hearing, given the age, if we could get someone from county to give us some advice. Now, I know they're not with us at the moment, but we are in a hybrid world, and I do hope some of them are working. Could I potentially suggest we have 10 minutes for a comfort break, of which that gives officers a chance to make a call and see if Mr. Finney or somebody could come online to help us with this. I feel if we don't do that, then we're not going to feel comfortable that we've at least tried. Thank you, Chair. And I'm sure everyone would appreciate a comfort break.
Thank you, and we don't take that as any criticism. Very much appreciative of your attempt to answer on behalf of somebody else. I suggest we take a comfort break anyway, and we will let you know when we come back whether it was possible to accommodate that request. So let us take a break to 11:15 and meet again then to debate this matter. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back. We'll now resume the meeting. We are, of course, on item 5. Now, before we had that short break, we had a request from Councillor Heather Williams that we see if some of the highways officers involved in drawing up the assessment we've been looking at might be available. I'm going to pass you over to Rebecca Smith, if I may, on this point.
Thank you, Chair. We've been trying to get hold of the county highways, but unfortunately there's no one available to take our call. However, I have also been trying to get hold of the 2021 census data to show the same thing, and I cannot find the data that has been published as yet down to that level. Michael's still trying at the same time.
I will ask Dr. Richard Williams for a brief comment on that, but I don't want to take further questions. I think Mr. Hammond has made a very good attempt to answer all of the questions that we put to him originally, so I'm keen to move on to the debate. Dr. Richard Williams, did you want to make a comment on that, or are you happy to put your comments in the debate?
I can email the link if it's useful. I've got it on my phone.
No, I don't want to be circulating additional documents or additional reading at this stage. So, Councillor Dr. Richard Williams, if you would just include any information that you've derived from that additional information in your contribution to the debate, I would be most grateful. Okay, members, I think unless officers have anything to add, we are now ready to proceed to the debate. So can I invite speakers on this? I think the first I have is Councillor Judith Rippeth.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring what I consider a bit of local knowledge. I mean, I obviously do not represent the ward itself, but I live quite close to it in Milton. And I can really confirm that parking in the evening is especially difficult. And I think some of this is Orchard Park is quite a densely populated area. So if you take the way it's built, in contrast to maybe some places that have been referenced, like Huntingdon Road, the homes, if they're not flats, they're often townhouses, and that means that there's actual less public road space in between the dwellings and the carports, etc. So parking is a real difficulty. So I don't think you can just look at it in such a broad brush approach of this is further out of the centre, so therefore it will mean something else. So I think it's quite specific to that area, and I therefore think that loss of that underground car park and halving of the number of spaces, or almost halving, is going to be detrimental and changes this considerably. And at this stage, aside from the landscaping being kind of reduced and more hard standing, at this stage I really don't feel I can support this.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I will be listening to the figures that are quoted later, and hopefully Councillor Dr. Richard Williams gives his views in debate. I think the parking is something, I appreciate it was a big part of the debate, a consideration for most of us, but we are looking at this afresh, so I have that in my mind. So I'm looking just as it is now and the changes that have happened subsequently. It isn't a minor sort of reduction of losing a few spaces. It's quite a considerable cut in the parking provision. The cycle store as well, I know with the way it's been reconfigured, I know it's only the loss of 2 spaces, but it's still another loss. Appreciate we have more studios, 1-bedroom studios in there than was before, and it was more 1-bedroom. I still personally don't see that because it's a studio rather than a 1-bedroom, that doesn't mean that you'll have 2 people and couples sharing them. I think that's still a valid thing to happen. So I don't think we can assume that it's one person per room. Probably have to go on something like 1.5. I think we can assume there aren't children in those situations, but you don't know. But with that in mind, I do have a lot of sympathy, I have to say, with the fact that this is substantial changes to the original proposal. But I do take the advice of the legal advice we've had that that's not something that's appropriate for us to look at. I'd also really like to draw members' attention not only to the objections that have been made by the Community Council, but on page 20 and page 21, there have been objections by our officers, by the urban design team and landscape officers, sort of over time. I know there's been some revisions. And I'd like to say that for me, we had a site visit when we first went out, so we're familiar with the site, some of us, and it is I would say it's a bit of an awkward site. And actually a lot of the original concerns were about how the street scene would look. And I do welcome the fact that we've got an extended gap between the other property. Giving it a balance, that is something that is welcome. But to take up the front for car parking, I think does have an alteration to that, where they're going to do it, and it is a loss. And I don't think that the changes enhance the area as a whole with the way they're doing. So parking, a big issue, obviously. I'm not happy with the reduction, and I'm definitely not supportive on that ground. But I think, even with all the other changes as well, overall, this is just not a positive thing for the local area, for how it's going to look either, for its provision, and I'm minded at this point to refuse, Chair.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to take next Councillor Dr. Tumi Hawkins. I beg your pardon, Councillor Peter Sanford first, and then I'll come back. Let me just say that it is helpful to have local knowledge, particularly of parking conditions. So if there are any other members who may have that sort of local knowledge, then that would be, their comments would be welcome. But Councillor Peter Sanford next.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of the preceding discussion has focused around car ownership and ratios of cars to flats, but bear in mind these are being offered as buy-to-rent flats, which could be rented in the short term by almost anyone. For example, building contractors, a team shows up with 4 transit vans, that's going basically to fill most of the available parking space. And as the Community Council said, there's little or no overspill on the street, so I'm really uncomfortable approving this application with so few spaces, 24 for 80 apartments. There's no wiggle room at all for large vehicles, so I'm tending to not approve this application.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Tumi Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can we have on screen the planning balance page, please? Effectively, my view is this. We've got the amended design does not harm neighbour amenity. I will switch that over to the refusal section. If we look at it in terms of the landscape, the degree of harm, in my view, is significant because it takes off the shrubs, trees, whatever it was that was supposed to be there, and replaces it with hard standing, which means the amenity of the neighbours is affected too. Yes, there is an increase in the separation between the existing and the proposed, but that does not, in my view, compensate for the removal of the landscape structure or the landscape proposal that was there before. It is reducing the number of car parking spaces, in my view, is not a minor amendment. It is not small. And I will say this, the applicants are actually playing the planning system because this is a huge change, especially knowing just how difficult parking is in the area. And as I said, I went there yesterday evening after 9 on my way back from somewhere else because I thought I want to see what it's like at night. And yes, it was crowded. Some were already parking on the streets. Even the building at the very one before this proposal, there was parking in front of it, on the corner. So there is an issue. And by reducing the parking space proposed for this, it will only make it worse, in my view. So there is more harm that is caused by the proposal than I am willing to accept. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm about to call Dr. Richard Williams. I wonder if you'd agree if me call Councillor Ariel Khan first and then come to you. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I agree with Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins that I don't believe that the removal of the entire underground car park and such a significant reduction, in my view, of parking space to be considered a minor amendment, and that also agree with Councillor Peter Sanford that 24 parking spaces for 80 apartments is a really absurdly small number, it feels like, even if there are studios. Because like he said, there is no wiggle room at all for overspill. So, especially in Orchard Park, which has some very serious parking issues and has had parking issues for quite a while.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start with this point about the 2021 census. I mean, it is available freely online. Orchard Park is divided up into a number of parcels where it gives you census data for ownership of cars. So the specific part of Orchard Park we're talking about here, the census 2021 records 76.1% of households have one or more cars.
I'm sorry, Dr. Williams, could you just go through this a little more slowly, because I think you've given us some...
Sorry, Chair, I'm trying to be quick.
Just allow for old brains.
No, it's my fault. So I'm looking at the census 2021. It divides Orchard Park up into a number of small parcels where you get data. The specific parcel of Orchard Park we're talking about, census 2021, records car ownership of 76.1% of households within this part of Orchard Park own at least one car, one or more cars or vans. According to what I'm looking at, every single parcel of Orchard Park is divided up into about 5 or 6 data bundles. Every single one records car ownership of 76% or higher. So it ranges between 76% and 86%. If you look to the south, you immediately see car ownership is much lower in the areas adjacent. Car ownership in those areas ranges between 59% and 63%. So it's at least 10% fewer households in the areas to the south own cars as compared to Orchard Park. It's colour-coded, this map. It's quite obviously, you can see it, there is higher car ownership there. So I rely on that on the basis of, or rather in relation to what's stated by the county transport team in paragraph 6.11, where they suggest that even though car ownership in Orchard Park was higher in 2011, it would be lower today, and they draw an analogy with areas to the south. My reading is that that's clearly not the case, and the census 2021 shows quite clearly that car ownership in Orchard Park in 2021 was still higher than in areas to the south, very clearly, and therefore the calculations they make, which seem to assume car ownership in Orchard Park is now in line with areas to the south, is not correct. So it's a shame they haven't used the most recent data, and it's a shame the committee doesn't have the full benefit of that. Otherwise, I will be brief here. I share the concerns of other members. I don't think there's adequate parking provision here. I think you can't, in a sense, have it both ways. I think you can't both say this is not student accommodation, you know, but there'll be nobody wanting cars either. It's, I'm afraid, I think one or the other. I'm not satisfied. I also would lay some weight on points made earlier about the harm to the landscaping from this proposal, the increase in car parking spaces. So I'm minded to refuse, Chair. Hopefully that was clear.
I'm going to call Councillor Eileen Wilson. I would say that a number of members have said that they are minded to refuse, so we will need to give careful thought as to what basis, if the committee were to come to that decision, we might want to do so. Councillor Eileen Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to the other members in the debate and having listened to Dr. Richard Wilson's feedback from the censors, I too am inclined to refuse this application because I know that we've been told that there is already a high incidence in Orchard Park of HMOs, and it's difficult to draw a correlation perhaps with the likely demographic of the build-to-rent apartments, but it does seem like the car ownership, even with those in HMOs who might be more transient or people renting, that the incidence of car ownership is high. So I'm not confident with the figures that we've been given about potential car ownership and the suitability of only having 24 parking spaces.
Thank you for that. I think, members, we're nearly ready to move to a vote. Before we do that, I'd just like to comment on one or two points myself. I think it's very important we recognise the advice we've had from officers that this is appropriate for a Section 73 application, and indeed I think we need to be careful not to suggest that developers are playing the planning system if they use the system that is put before them, as is the case here. I asked for the planning balance slide to be retained there because I think if we look at the potential reasons for refusal, officers say a minor degree of harm, and that was indeed backed up by the points made by the developer that this affects 6% of the landscaped area, and that is rather offset by more of it being in the ground rather than over the underground car park that was originally planned. So I think that's a factor we need to take into account. Personally, I would be persuaded that that is only a minor degree of harm. We've all come back to the reduction in the quantum of car parking on site. Now this is, I think, a difficult one for us because we're all keen to encourage less reliance on cars, and we see in that area that, as was pointed out, since 2011 there has been a substantial change in the options for those wanting to travel around without relying on their own cars, and of course the provision of car club spaces, which is for the moment a slightly uncertain factor as to how many people would take them up, is a contribution here. Now we've had some comments from those with the local experience of the existing parking situation in that area, and although we weren't able to hear from county officers, we did hear a very thorough analysis of the submission made by county officers, by our own officers, looking, including at the stats. I accept that Councillor Richard Williams may have raised some more recent statistics that might have been taken into account, and I think maybe haven't been. My own view, for what it's worth, is that what we need to do is to encourage people, if they have cars, to leave them at home. And that may depend on them having somewhere to leave them. But I think we also need to consider to what extent this block goes ahead would attract people who are not expecting to be able to have cars on site. I'm concerned that the question of how those spaces may be allocated was not addressed because, as Councillor Peter Sanford raised, there may be some here who bring in vehicles, and one can foresee some arguments as to who gets the spaces, and some concerns, as expressed by the Community Council, as to where any cars that are surplus to the spaces may be placed. But for what it's worth, I believe that the best possible assessment has been made of the likely demand. The developer also presented some evidence based on local experience, and we should listen to experience of other sites in the area, even if we insist there are differences. So I think in considering the planning balance here, I would suggest we are reduced to this one factor, and that if members are inclined not to support this application, then it will clearly be on the second factor as listed on the right-hand side of the planning balance you can see before you. I'm not going to say which way I'm inclined to vote, but I now propose we do move to a vote and determine this matter. Can I have a seconder? Yes. I do not intend to spend time discussing our reasons. I think that planning officers have sufficient information from the debate to see that our reasons come down to the item as listed on the planning balance already. I think it's not good practice to spend too much time debating possible reasons because it implies we've made up our minds, and I want members to make up their minds for themselves. So if Councillor Heather-Williams will forgive, I don't intend to spend further time on this unless officers ask me to. Are officers satisfied that? Yeah. Okay, so I think we know that if we do vote against, we understand what the reasons might be. So I'm now going to move, having had a seconder for my motion, I'm now going to move to a vote, which we'll do on the usual electronic basis. Members will know you'll press the blue button in front of you, and then if you want to vote in favour of the application to accept the officer recommendation of approval, then you press the green button, and if you want to refuse the application, you press the red button.
Sorry, Chair, I will get up on the screen, just a slight moment of there we go.
Thank you. Well, members, as we can see, that application for section 73 to vary condition 2 in relation to the approved scheme at west of Neil Drive is refused by a majority of 6 to 3. The existing consent stands, and it will be for the developer to decide on the next steps. We'll now move on to item 6, land east of Ermine Street, Caxton. But before we do that, I'll ask our chair, the committee chair, Martin Kahn, to return and take over from me. Thank you, members. Do you want a short break or? We will just take a short break while the proper chairman takes over. So we'll meet again at 11:45.
Welcome back. I now resume the chair. Members, item 5 is the application. Item 6 is land east of Ermine Street, Caxton. It's an outline application with all matters reserved except for access for the erection of up to 9 self-built dwellings and ancillary works. It was called in by the parish council as a departure application. There are a number of key issues outlined in the report. See page 51. It will be presented by Charlotte Peat as the presenting officer, and the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions in section 106. Could you please present it? Thank you very much indeed.
Sorry, Charlotte.
Sorry about that, we just had some technical difficulties there. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so thank you, Chair, for letting me present to begin with. So this application is an outline application at land east of Ermine Street in Caxton. It is for 9 dwellings and all matters, 9 self-built dwellings, and all matters are reserved apart from access. There are no particular updates and amendments other than what Rebecca had already shared about the MPPF being updated, and just to reiterate that that doesn't change the assessment in this case. So just to show the scheme, on the left-hand side of the screen is the site location plan for the application. This shows the application site in red and land within the ownership of the applicant in blue. I have inserted a green star on the image to show where the BNG would be provided. So it's outside of the application site, but within land within the ownership of the applicant. And because of this, it will need to be secured by a legal agreement, and this is outlined within the officer report. On the right-hand side is a plan to show a little bit of wider context. So the site is the sort of red outlined area with the blue star on top of it. Cambourne is to the right-hand side with the orange star, and Cambourne West is marked by the yellow star. The purple lines show the public footpaths that are in close proximity to the site. So of particular interest for this application is the one that runs from the Caxton village along the back boundary of the site and up towards Cambourne. Also, yeah. Oh, sorry, that's my mistake. There we go. Sorry about that, Councillor Hawkins. There you go, that's a bit clearer now. So this public footpath is the one I was just referring to here. And you can see these purple lines leading around which show the public footpaths. And just to reiterate, this is Cambourne over here, and Cambourne West, the new development up here. And there's a green line I've added here, and this is to show the new cycleway that's been installed from Cambourne West down to the entrance of the development site as part of this development. Those members who came on the site visit yesterday will have seen that this has been installed. Okay. So this slide shows the access plan for the application. So just as a reminder, it's an outline with all matters reserved apart from access. So the access is being agreed as part of this application. You can see the red line comes up to here. As part of the application, the Local Highways Authority requested that the entrance onto Ermine Street should be upgraded, and this has been agreed by the applicant and will be done as part of the application, and this is agreed again by legal agreement as it's outside the red line of the site. So slide 5 shows the indicative plans that were submitted with the application. These are indicative only because the application is outline. So the sort of layout of the site, appearance of dwellings, scale and landscaping will all come forward at a later date. But this is just to give an idea of how something could look on the site. I've now got some photographs of the site. So on the left-hand side, this is a Google Maps image looking from Ermine Street down towards the site. You can see the blue horse box just at the rear there. That's the site sort of where the houses would be located is just behind there. In the image on the right-hand side, I've moved further down sort of to the front of the red line boundary of the site, and you can see the horse box is a bit closer now. So this is the access route, and then behind the fencing is where the sort of development begins. On the left-hand side, I've just moved closer, so I'm stood next to the horse box in this picture, looking into the field. You can see on the boundaries that these are already sort of well treed boundaries, and you can just about see that the site slopes down towards the rear. So the public footpath runs just behind the hedging at the back of the site there. In the right-hand image, I've turned around to look sort of away from that element of the development site and towards the rear of the houses that are in the immediate context. So here is the back of the houses that are front onto Ermine Street. I'm just going to flick back because I forgot to mention that you can see the sort of red path here, and this is the cycleway. So it extends from Cambourne West all the way up to the entrance of the site there. Okay, so just to cover some key aspects of the application. The self-build aspect of this application is a key material consideration for members. So it's set out in the officer report that South Cambridgeshire District Council is a right to build vanguard authority with a statutory duty to give suitable development permission to ensure enough plots of land are permitted to meet the demand for self and custom build housing in the authority's area. The table on the slide, and it's also included in the officer report, shows that to comply with these requirements, 497 self and custom build permissions should have been granted by the 30th of October 2022. However, only 236 permissions were granted, and therefore there is a current shortfall between the demand and supply of 261 dwellings. Just to reiterate again that there's been a number of appeal decisions relating to self-builds in the district, and in all of these the inspector describes the shortfall as significant in the local authority, and officers would agree that the current situation does represent a significant shortfall. This is just to highlight to members the landscape and visual appraisal that was done and submitted as part of the application. So again, the purple lines show the public footpaths in the surrounding area. The blue rings are sort of the distances from the site. And in the landscape and visual appraisal, all the viewpoints which are shown, you can just about see the blue dots dotted around. These viewpoints have been selected, and the visibility of the site is shown from these. Officers do consider that this assessment is sufficient to make an assessment on the application, and would like to remind members that when reviewing this document, the landscape officer in the surgery described the visual impact as negligible from these views. So finally, just moving on to the planning balance now. Officers consider that the application should be supported due to the contribution towards the significant self-build need in the district. It is considered that it's well located in terms of sustainable connections and screening from surrounding built form and the vegetation on the other boundaries. It's acknowledged that the proposal would conflict with the settlement policies and result in a minor level of visual harm. However, it is considered that this is outweighed by the benefit of providing self-build in an appropriate location. So just to summarise, the officer recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have we any questions of clarification from the officer? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Charlotte, for your report. I've got two questions. Could you flick back to the map which shows the cycle path, please? Yes, the green line seems to stop before the new Camborne West roundabout. Is that just an error, or is there not a continuous cycle path through to Camborne?
So apologies, that's, so the cycle path extends up Ermine Street and then sort of goes across the land to Camborne West. I didn't include that on the map. This is just a line I've inserted on the image, but yes, it does extend all the way up to the new development.
Okay, thank you. And could you flick down to the images of the site entrance, please? That one. Did I hear you say this is actually a Google image on the left-hand side? Okay, because when we visited yesterday, my impression was that tree and the hedge on the other side had grown a lot more, and the visibility coming out onto Ermine Street is somewhat restricted, which is a point I'll come back to a little bit later. So that's not an up-to-date image. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Ooh. Is that okay? Yeah. I just want to have a point of clarification about the Section 106. Normally, when you have a development and the developer builds a number of houses, they must recoup the costs from the sale of those individual houses. And I just wondered how Section 106 works in relation to self-build. Is the money, the cost of Section 106 payments then cascaded down to the people, the individual people who will be self-building those houses? Or is it how is that cost recouped by the person paying the Section 106? So it's just, I did try to find it in the paperwork, but I couldn't.
Yeah, so there is a Section 106 agreement with financial contributions as part of the application, although it hasn't been finalised at this stage. This is tied to the applicant when it sort of is agreed as the legal agreement. So that's how it's carried forward. So it's with the current developer rather than the individuals.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. Just say thank you to Charlotte for doing the site visit for us yesterday in the pouring rain. Paragraph 8.80. Just to clarify, are we talking of 10% biodiversity net gain or 1%? 1.
Sorry, I haven't found the paragraph, but it's just over 1% biodiversity net gain.
Okay.
Councillor Handley.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask, the boundary of this area, does it fall, perhaps I'll put it a different way, the trees and the hedging around the side, are they, would the stems of those or the trunks of those be on the boundary? The reason I'm asking the question is that they're actually quite substantial, and they may protrude quite a long way into the area that's subject to this planning application, and I'd hate to see them hacked back or lost. That's my question.
So I'm just going to flick back. In fact, that plan is probably the easiest one to see it on. So those trees, I think you're referring to here and here, aren't within the application site. So those are the ones at the entrance of the site. The other boundaries with the sort of vegetation that's established is included in the application site, and there is a condition to require the retention of those as part of the application.
Yeah, I think thank you. It was clear on that those old, the old hedge line and trees are pretty much quite a way away, aren't they, from the development? So yeah, thank you. That's reassured me.
Thank you. Have we any more questions? Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. It's a short, but slightly technical question. Paragraph 820, and it was referred to on the slides as well, it refers to South Cambridgeshire District Council as a vanguard authority and then this statutory authority in Section 2A. That seems quite important to me, and I think some weight seems to be attached to that in the context of a self-build. So can I just get some clarification on what that vanguard authority means? Does that mean we're under an enhanced obligation? Because from memory, I think we talked about this before, dates from 2014, my memory serves me correctly. So but some clarification on the relevance of that precise point would be helpful.
I think the explanation of what the vanguard is set out in 8.20 itself. So it means we have to give suitable development permission in respect to enough service plots of land. So we've signed up to be recognised as a district council that does have a requirement to provide self-build and custom-build plots.
So, sorry, if I could just come back. So to just clarify, are we saying that duty under Section 2A specifically applies to South Cambridgeshire, doesn't apply to all planning authorities? We've opted into something. That's correct?
Yeah, so okay. we are a vanguard authority, as in we've opted in to be one that provides self-build plots where possible, and that's why we've suggested that the weight is given to that on the planning balance.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah, Councillor Harvey. Can you put your loudspeaker on?
Yes, start again. A bit of clarification on density, that's 8.33 and 8.34, because I didn't really understand the reasoning between those two paragraphs. The 40 dwellings per hectare in rural centres and minor rural centres, group villages to achieve 30 dwellings per hectare, and then in 8.34 it says the equivalent density is 15 per hectare, so therefore the proposed density accords with policy H8. Have I sort of misunderstood that, the way that's working, that seems to be less than the 30 dph?
Yeah, okay, so thank you for picking that up. So this is making reference to, I think the way the policy is worded, and I haven't got it in front of me, is sort of about the maximum number of houses that can be achieved within a site, so not going above a density that would sort of adversely impact the character of the area and things like that. So 15 being under those limitations would therefore be acceptable.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think now it's time to move on. Is the agent, Mr. Ansell, present? Would you like to come forward? I should remind you that you have 3 minutes to make your presentation, and we'll listen to what you've got to say. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This statement is made on behalf of the applicant, Caxton LVA LLP. who's fully committed to developing the site as a self-build. As set out previously, a mechanism will be in place to ensure that it's brought forward as a self-build, as is commonly established in other self-build proposals. In recent years, there's been an increase in the number of people on the register in South Cambridgeshire for a self-build plot, and that's quite clearly highlighted in the officer's report, demonstrating a shortfall of 261 plots within the district. This shortfall is further evidenced in a recent appeal decision for proposals on land at St Peter Street, and that's located further south in Caxton itself. The appeal was redetermined on the 1st of August within the initial decision. The inspector noted that there was a serious and substantial shortfall in the provision of self and custom built houses within the district, and in the redetermination, the inspector agreed with the previous, noting that the need to increase the supply of self-build opportunities should carry great weight. The provision of 9 self-build plots within the site would therefore make an overall contribution to the identified demand, and as previous inspectors have done, should be given great weight in the determination of the application. We'd like to thank the Parish Council and other consultee comments that have come in, and we've worked with the case officer and those consultees to ensure there's no technical objections to the application. And just to briefly summarise, the highway officer is satisfied that the access for the development is safe, and that is in respect to visibility displays as well. We don't have any objections from the lead local flood authority in respect to the flood risk assessment and the drainage strategy that we've proposed. The ecology officer, has no objection. We are achieving a net gain in biodiversity. That's through the planting of wildflower meadows and the management of the woodland to the north of the site. And we consider the scheme would fit comfortably within the existing built fabric of Caxton with negligible visual impact, and that the landscape officer also raises no objections on this point. In considering the overall planning balance, and again referencing the recent appeal decision in St Peter Street, the planning inspector found that substantial weight to the benefits of self-built housing outweighed the conflict with relevant development plan policies dealing with the location of new houses, and that the appeal decision should succeed. In the same appeal, it is stated that it is common ground that the village is not wholly lacking in sustainability credentials, with the recent upgrades to the footway and cycleways to Cambourne. The application site itself is located closer to Cambourne, and so it should be considered more sustainable in its location. Being at the northern end of Caxton means that it's well positioned in regard to the upgraded shared footpath and cycleway running from Cambourne West along Ermine Street up to the entrance of the site. Overall, the accessibility to public transport in the form of bus stops, which is approximately 100 metres from the entrance of the site, as well as pedestrian and cycle links, means it's well considered to benefit from the good level of sustainability connections to surrounding services and facilities. This allows the opportunity for the users to meet their needs in a sustainable manner. Again, there is an identified and significant unmet need for self-built plots within the district. The council will have to grant further self-built developments in order to meet its legal duty to provide sufficient service plots.
Sorry, can you wind up, please, because it's 3 minutes.
Yeah, not to worry, just 2 paragraphs left. Central government placed a great commitment to support the self-build and custom house building sector, and when compared to volume house building, self-built homes are generally built to a higher standard of design, use more modern methods of construction, and tend to be more innovative. Future plot design will need to comply with a design statement and illustrative house types, which have been designed to ensure the plots will be sympathetic to each other and the existing village of the existing character of the village. Overall, we feel the proposals before you are well designed, lie in a sustainable location, and would meet a significant identified need for self-built plots, and respectfully request the Planning Committee to approve the application in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Have we any questions for the developer, please? Councillor Hawke.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Thanks for your presentation. I note you kept hitting with the shortage, shall we say, which actually led to leads to my question, which is, if this was granted, how do we know you're not going to turn this into a market housing? How do you propose to actually implement it as self-build?
So that would be tied up in the Section 106 agreement, which would ensure that the development comes forward as self-build, and usually the developer would apply for the first phase reserve matters, which would be the access and wider landscaping up to the plots themselves. Then the individual plots would be marketed for people to purchase, and the individual purchasers would come forward with an application for the design of the house to get that approved, and then construct that separately.
Thank you very much indeed. Having a comment from the presenting officer for a moment.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify what I said earlier about density, because I phrased it slightly incorrectly. So in terms of density, which was referred to in paragraphs 833 and 834, it's not, those figures aren't the maximum. The wording is that these will be the average that is achieved, but this can be varied depending on the character of the locality, the scale of the development, and other local circumstances. So it'd be making a judgment on the density of the development in line with the sort of local character. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to the Parish Council. Councillor Lawrence Kelly, from the Chair of Parish Council, is online. Are you present? Appears to be there, but we're trying to connect. Councillor Kelly, can you turn your microphone on and join? We'll wait for a couple of minutes to see if we can make contact. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Sorry, okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please, would you have 3 minutes, can you? Yeah, sorry. This is Councillor Lawrence Query from Parish Council. Can you confirm, first of all, that you have the permission of the Parish Council to speak for you?
Yes, I'm actually the chair of the Parish Council, but yes, I have.
Okay, you have 3 minutes. Can you please present your case?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Parish Council unanimously objected to this development. The prime reasons were as follows. 1, the development is outside the village envelope and on greenbelt land. 2, the sloping site has drainage problems with heavy rainfall. 3, the site entrance has vehicular and pedestrian safety issues. And 4, service provision are remote and limited. Number 1, the development is outside the village envelope. Frequent references made to the self-build quotas having a shortfall. This shortfall, in my opinion, has wrongly encouraged planning to permit restrictive developments outside the village envelope and on greenbelt land without due consideration. Reference was made to self-build development in the previous development in St. Peter Street. What it fails to mention is that this site was a brownfield site, a former piggery. This development enhanced the village by its removal. The proposed development does not add any substance to the village. The self-build quota should not override all other considerations, as in this case. The developers have included a provision in this application for additional self-build housing, even further outside the village boundary. It's marked on their site map. They are either arrogant or already have provisional approval. The countryside is supposed to protect villages from gradual encroachment and guard against incremental growth in unsustainable locations. Clearly not in this case. Two, the sloping site has drainage problems with heavy rainfall. The resident of number 14 Brockholt Road has already reported that the field holds water and floods the footpath, as recognised in the earlier rejected planning application. Yet this is dismissed without due consideration. Three, the site entrance has vehicular and pedestrian safety issues. The existing residential access road is not included in development plan application. The road is not suitable to serve additional residential properties. It does not have a pavement on the north side of the for pedestrians or pushchair access without the need to cross private land or walk on the main road. The south side pavement will be the same once the road's extended. The width of the existing road is very restrictive for commercial/emergency vehicles to pass either side, with no room to correct this. The existing road is not part of the planning application. How can the application be considered for approval without a proposed solution? Four, service provision are remote and limited. All access to Camborne amenities will require driving, as there is no existing cycle footpath route. The 60-mile-per-hour main road to Camborne has no footpaths. The interconnecting bridle path to Camborne becomes a mud bath when it rains and is virtually impassable. If at a later date a suitable footpath is installed, the walking distance will be several miles and the car will likely to be used. This does not promote sustainability travel as claimed in the application document. The report claims no need to travel by car. This is nonsense. The existing residential bus service in Caxton was due to be cancelled last year. It is now on life support. Camborne doctor's surgery.
Could you please, your 3 minutes is up. Can you please wind up?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doctor surgeries do not accept patients from Camborne patients. They have to go to Bourne if they have capacity, which is several miles away. Joanne Restel, resident of number 14 Brockholt Road, is an NHS health visiting team worker and commented that her family all are registered at the Bourne surgeries for the reasons explained. She claimed spare capacity of Camborne Medical Centre was of no relevance to Caxton. Why was this comment in the report?
Sorry, can you finish that, please?
Okay, just the last sentence. Many residents have contacted Parish Council with their concerns and requested that the development is refused, hence the unanimous vote of the Council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Have we got any questions for the Parish Council, please? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Thank you for your presentation. I note you mentioned that there's no sufficient cycle access, but we have in front of us, and we did see yesterday, images, and as you saw yesterday, the cycle path that's just been created to join up with Camborne. So is that something you acknowledge now exists and will satisfy that objection that you have?
You're quite correct. There is a new cycle path, but if you examined it further, you would see that it's not currently in use. That section you looked at is in use, but it does not actually go into Camborne. going, and I don't know what's going to happen further down. I actually went up myself yesterday and had a look, and it comes to a dead stop. So I can't comment if it's suitable or not, if it's not actually there. I don't know when that development's going to be finished. But the cycle path is in Caxton, but it's not all the way into Cambourne.
Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so I can clarify that. The cycle route is connected to Cambourne West, which is the new settlement, rather than Cambourne at the moment. So it leads up to the entrance of Cambourne West. There are further links planned as part of the Cambourne West development to connect that then to Cambourne as well. But just to clarify that it's Cambourne West it's connected to at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins, do you have further questions?
Thank you for that clarification. But at least there is cycle access to a part of Cambourne. That's the point. The second point, I note that twice you mentioned that the site is on Greenbelt. It's not Greenbelt, is it? It's Greenfield, because there's no Greenbelt in that area.
Well, excuse me for my lack of knowledge of that. To me, it's a green field, and I regard that as Greenbelt. But if it's not, then you're correct.
Technical term. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Heather Williams.
My question is partially, oh God, that was quite echoey, partially been answered because I was sort of on the sort of green belt, but also brownfield got mentioned as well. So just wondering if you could, we've established the green belt, well, what you meant by the brownfield, that wasn't particularly clear, and I do appreciate officers might need to give us technical clarification on that as well.
Is that a question I need to answer? Because I can if you wish.
Should I come back on that one, or?
Chair, if you want to let the parish council representative, my question is to explain what he meant by brownfield, and then we'll have an officer let us know the technical status of it.
Exactly.
Okay, well, the reason I mentioned it in the first place was that in the document it referred to the St. Peter Street site as a reference to support this application. But what wasn't mentioned was that there's quite a history behind that site, and there was a piggery there, and the locals were very keen to get rid of it because for obvious reasons. And the site, that site was then designated by the council as a brownfield site, which I understand, I wasn't directly involved with it, I understand allowed the development, which was a positive development as far as the locals of Caxton were concerned. But it wasn't of the same caliber as the application that's being considered today.
Can we have some clarity on that?
Yeah, so the site that's being referred to and has been referred to in the officer report where there was an appeal allowed for self-build housing is to the southern end of the village, and prior to development it did have agricultural buildings on it, so that's where it could be described as brownfield because there was built form on the site already. That is clearly a difference from the current application. But what I will say is when the inspector considered that application, they suggested there was no visual harm because of the existing built form, but there was some heritage harm. In this application, we are suggesting there is a minor level of visual harm because of the change to the land. So just to make you aware of the differences there. Thank you.
The point about green belt was raised. I think you perhaps could clarify so everybody's clear to the difference what is meant by green belt, what's meant by outside the development framework. What?
Yeah, no problem. So again, so this site is not in green belt, which is a designated area of protected open land. This is, we would describe it as greenfield in that it is sort of a grassed area with development not on it currently, but it's not sort of, it doesn't have that specific designation of greenbelt land.
Okay, Councillor Fane.
No, my question has been dealt with. Thank you, Chair.
Have we any other questions? Thanks. Oh, sorry. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. I was hoping someone else might raise it. There was mention of flooding, but I wasn't clear where that was and the impact on this particular site, please. Can you clarify that?
Well, this comment came from the resident of number 14, Brockholt Road, one of the resident that actually wrote in to make comment on this application, and they border where the developments are proposed. And if you look on the drawing or the map that's showing the houses in position, it'll be to the southeast side where there's a bridle path. And the lady Joanne, she commented that frequently floods because the slope goes in that direction, and the water then collects around that area. She told me that on the previous application that was put in, I haven't checked this personally, but when they proposed 30 houses, there was some amendment made to put a pond or something around that area to be a collection point for the water, which he says that if whether like we have now or we had a week ago, it was fine. But as soon as we get some rain, it all collects there. This is known. It's actually partly covered in the report, but it's not covered in any detail. But to say that there isn't a drainage problem there, which I'm not suggesting has been said, but it has to be dealt with if this proposal goes ahead. But it does impinge or impede the footpath, the use of it.
Thank you for that clarification. Maybe we can look at that in the debate. Yep.
Thank you. Do we have any comments? I think this is something that would normally be dealt with at detailed stage rather than as an outline. Can you clarify?
Sorry, so can you just clarify where the surface water issues were, or what they were referring to? So I just missed that part.
Well, looking at the development picture showing all the houses in position, it's referring directly to the development site. It's to the south east side where there's a bridle path runs alongside it, and that's where all the water collects. The slope actually slopes in that direction. It slopes from west to east.
I think I'll just share my screen just so we can clarify, if that's okay. Sorry. Yeah, that's what we're doing. Yeah, okay. Is it worth me sort of bringing that up for clarity? Yeah, I'll do that. So I'll just bring up this plan here. So the application has been assessed by the drainage officer following a flood risk assessment which was updated during the course of the application. The sort of details of that will come forward later, but the sort of infiltration rates and the surface water issues were resolved and agreed, and as part of that you can just about see at the end there, sorry I haven't got the pointer on, so let me know if that's not clear, but a sustainable drainage feature was included at the end there because of the awareness around the site sloping to the end there and the potential issues regarding water on that.
Yes, I'm just highlighting what the locals have pointed out to me, and they said there's quite a collection of water when it rains heavy. So if that's being addressed, then I have no knowledge of that.
If we have no more questions, thank you very much, Councillor Kelly, and we now move on to the debate. Who would like to speak in the debate? Councillor Hanley.
I wonder if I could ask to give a reassurance. I mean, is it possible that 9 self-build plots could be bought by the same person? It's a serious question. I mean, you know, the whole reason this is a self-build site, which is, to me, the only reason you would allow this is because it's self-built, because it's outside of the village framework. Okay, so you know, it's a slightly mischievous question, but it's also a genuine one. I mean, is there anything to stop that from happening?
So, by definition, which is included in the officer report, self-build has to be built for the person that would live in it. So a person wouldn't, well, I think they wouldn't be able to sort of build 9 houses and live in all of them. I don't know if you want to comment on anything that we put in the legal agreement.
I could do with a few minutes to find one of Vanessa's, because she's done one of them.
Okay. What we can do is we can find, there's possibly something within a legal agreement that would sort of tie that arrangement down. But Rich has just asked for a few minutes to find that if you'd like to see that example.
In the meantime, Councillor Williams, Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And I do understand the reasoning for the question. But I'll sort of sway away from that, and I will take at face value the self-build that we've got on here while that's being dealt with. I think the site visit, though very, very soggy, was appreciated, and it did help. We've had on visibility to the sort of coming into the site, obviously from the main road. I did feel that if actually it was properly cut back to where it should be, because it was on the path, then the visibility would be better. So let's hope County pull their finger out and deal with that situation. But mindful as well of what outline is. And my understanding is like access and things like those, which I understand residents raising would be something that would come at a later date and be reserved. I'm getting nods. No. We're sort of on the access bit.
So the access is a reserved matter, but it's included with the outline. So access is the only detail that's coming forward at this stage.
I'm talking about the bit down the bottom.
Onto Ermine Street, is that what you... So the access that connects to Ermine Street, that will be secured as part of the legal agreement as part of this application.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But the bit down the bottom, the access to the footpath.
Oh, my apologies. So
we had the footpath.
The layout of the site will come at a later stage as part of the. We've put a condition on to control that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So I wasn't being clear. It's because the footpath access had got raised, so I was referring to that and saying that for mine, the entrance to the site with the upgrades, I referred to that the first point, that seems acceptable. Were it to be a development of market housing, 9, would our views be different? Probably yes, but we have to look at what's in front of us. We do have a shortage of self-build, and if I take it in its purest form, with people genuinely self-building, I think it's a positive thing. I think it's nice to have individuality in design, and that's what very much, if you think back to some of our historical buildings that we hold very dearly, they were done each to specific needs. You think of thatched cottages and the like, they're all very different, and I love that part of our character in South Cambs is that we do have a lot of individual properties, and I do think the self-build properties give an opportunity to keep that going, so long as obviously the rules are abided by. The design and layout, as we've heard, is for later on down the line. I think because they are self-build and because we have a shortage, and when we look at overall, the rear of even on the indicative plans, but I appreciate, but even if we went to the maximum point of the red line, it's still not going beyond where the houses in the locality are. It does provide an element of symmetry. The fact that there could be more houses sort of packed in and there isn't, I see as an advantage. Many of us have sat at this committee and see actually normally we've got developers pushing us to just get 1 or 2 more in because of the land value here. Would it be nice to keep it as a green field? Absolutely, that'd be lovely. But from a planning basis and on an outline application, if we know that there is the flooding condition attached, and I think the officers are happy that that's secure enough, and we know that we've protected the access down the bottom for people to be able to go through, and we don't have any issues with the access coming in as it's going to be upgraded, I don't see much. I'll be listening, but I don't see many reasons of which committee could refuse. So as it currently stands, so I am listening, I'd be minded to approve following the officer recommendation.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points from me. Firstly, to pick up on Councillor Heather Williams' comments. I note in section 8.116, the access will only be upgraded prior to occupation of the development. I strongly feel it needs to be upgraded before any work is done on the site. I could just imagine the first articulated lorry turns up with a JCB on the back or a load of bricks. They're either going to get caught up on the overgrown tree or the hedge, or they're going to try reversing out onto Ermine Street and possibly blocking the main road through the village for minutes on end. So that to me needs to be brought forward. The other point, I was rather amused by the applicant's agent referring to the bus stop on Ermine Street as evidence of sustainable transport in Caxton. As Councillor Kelly was alluding to, the bus service in Caxton consists of 2 in the morning and 2 in the evening, which are aligned to take students to and from Combatant Village College. There is no bus service in the middle of the day. There's no bus service on weekends. So car use will definitely increase. Other than that, I'll probably abstain because I don't like the set out for the way the access is proposed at the moment. If that was a move forward to the beginning of the project, I'd be more inclined to vote for it.
There are comments now from about the legal position, and then perhaps afterwards you could comment upon the access issue.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and speak over the building noise. So I've got an example of a unilateral undertaking for a self-build that is going through at the moment. So there is a protected occupation period that is placed upon that land, and a disposal of the plot shall only be completed to a person registered with the council and recorded on the register maintained pursuant to section 1 of the 2015 Act as amended by the Housing and Planning Act. During the protected occupation period, a dwelling shall be occupied by the party who directly acquires the plot from the owner. And then from the date of first occupation of that dwelling until the expiration of the protected occupation period, that's 3 years, a dwelling shall be used as the principal residence of the party who completes the purchase of that plot. So I think that protects against the councillor scenario where there are 10 owners. But I think James Fisher, I've asked if he's available, but if councillors are happy with that.
I'm happy with that. Thank you. I'm sorry to have put you on the spot.
No, that's okay.
You've passed the
some
test.
Speedy reading.
You've passed the test. Fine.
Thank you.
Regarding the access and the time in which the access needs to be...
Yeah. So just to clarify, the triggers in the table that form part of the section 106, that's not been finalised. So if members did want that altered, we absolutely can do that. We could always take it away and then consult chair and vice chair on those matters. But I think it's usually done this way because the construction vehicle, if the access was put in first, then the construction vehicles can end up damaging the access and then it having to be sort of redone. So it's practically, it seems to work that way quite well. But if you did want that to be altered, we can sort of discuss that. That's no problem.
Councillor Sanford, have you comments?
Yes, I would like to hear more before we sign off on this. It may be a different site entrance. It is narrow, it is restricted visibility, and I can see all sorts of issues. So yes, if you'd like to take that away and come back to us, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Rippon.
Yeah, my point was following on about the access, and I think Councillor Sanford's probably right that you need to have, really adequate access for those large vehicles coming in to build on the site. But also the state in which it's left at the end, because you don't want to have a broken up road or one which is not going to last very long. Will there be a condition to make sure that it is to adoptable road standards, even if the road is not going to be adopted? Like what quality can we stipulate?
So in terms of the access, the access onto Ermine Street is the part that's included with this application. The internal site layout and the kind of standard of the roads will become as part of the reserve matters application. But however, in terms of the trigger, if committee agree and we change the heads of terms as such, we can change the trigger for the upgrade of the access to prior to commencement of development, and then include in that head of term that it should be maintained as such thereafter. And so it's maintained at that standard rather than installed at that standard and then driven all over and left in a state as such. So we can require it to be maintained at that standard as well as part of the head of term. But
it's fair enough to me. So you haven't got a small section which is battered and bruised when you've got the rest which is in much better state. Thank you.
Is there general agreement on this point? Can I see? Right. Thank you. Sorry, yeah. Okay, Councillor Fane.
Sorry, councillors, I had the sound up to assist with the building noise, but that is causing feedback.
Thank you, Chair. I intend to be relatively positive about this, so if members hear a constant whine while I'm speaking, I assure you it isn't me. I just wanted to look at the planning balance as set out by the planning officer. In terms of possible grounds for refusal, two material considerations. The first is the potential minor level of visual harm. Having looked at the site with others on the visit yesterday, I feel it is very well shielded by trees, including, I think it's from house number 172, where there will be a buffer retained from the existing house nearest to the site. I think the question of self-build is very important. We have met only 50% of the commitment which we as a Vanguard authority entered into. And we need to take very seriously the need to provide sites for self-build. And I think we should mostly be satisfied by the assurances we have that is real, that these will not be all bought up by one developer or anything like that. So looking at this site, I think it is a very sustainable site in many ways. We talked about the cycle lane. I'm satisfied as to the access arrangements which are included as part of this. In relation to biodiversity net gain, the field to the north, as I understand it, is to be put into a wildflower meadow. Now, we may say, well, this is only 1% BNG. I'm totally relaxed about the percentage. What matters is that a significantly larger field is to be committed to wildflower meadow for, I think it'll be a period of 30 years. And I would just mention in passing that from the point of view of the parish council, that this is a field which would otherwise, well, there was a proposal that it might have been included in the development of 30 houses. That's not relevant here, but I just think that the protection of that field is likely to be of value to the village. And I think the density is low, but I think that is appropriate for self-build. I think the accessibility is pretty good. So I think that this is, we have a commitment to deliver self-build, and that this, despite being outside the village framework, is a sustainable location which is appropriate for the proposal, and that we should therefore approve it as recommended.
Okay, have we any further comments? Okay, and I think now's the time to go to a vote. Can we present the vote? Thank you. If you're voting for, you would present on the green button. If you're voting against, it should be refused. You should be. If you're voting for the recommendation, you vote the green button, which is to approve. If you're voting to refuse, you press the red button. So that's, we have all of them in. What's it?
I think that's everybody.
Yes. So. Okay.
That's 9 votes in favour with 2 abstentions, Chair, so that has passed.
So the application is approved. Thank you very much. Now we come to the compliance report. Is Chris Brable available online?
Good afternoon, Chair. There's not a huge amount of changes on the compliance report this month. However, I would like to welcome a new officer, George Minehan, to the team, who has replaced Neil Langley, and we are working towards sorting out some of the things that Neil Langley was tasked with, some of the more complicated cases.
Sorry, can you hold a second? Can we have you?
Yep.
Can we get a screen? He's not on the screen. Okay. Can we go? Okay, fine. Sorry, can you start again? I'm sorry about that.
Of course I can, Chair, not a problem. So there's not a huge amount of changes on the compliance report this month, but we do have a new compliance officer started with us, George Minehan, who is Neil Langley's replacement. And George has already picked up on the work that Neil left off with, some of the more important sort of tasks that we've got going on with some of the more complicated cases. He's been with us now, started last week, and he's kind of taken the ball and run with it, really, which is really positive news for us moving forwards. Other than that, I don't really have much of an update for you.
Are there any questions from members? Professor Fenn.
Thank you, Chair. We no longer list the compliance issues, but I think there was a meeting on Monday in relation to a compliance issue in Redhill Close, and I am happy to take that up with officers outside this meeting. But I do think it's important that we are assured as a committee that compliance issues that have been raised previously are being dealt with.
In answer to that, I would say yes. I've obviously included on the report to contact obviously myself with any queries that we've got about compliance issues or specific cases. What I'm trying to be mindful of with the report is revealing information in the public forum that, or having discussions that we perhaps shouldn't be having, and we should be having, you know, at a level on an individual basis. And that's kind of like the reasons behind not putting out a full report of cases where we're taking various steps, but rather just keeping the committee updated where we've taken action with the action screen, where we list the new enforcement notices that we've issued, or where we've taken steps towards prosecutions, that sort of thing, which we will continue to obviously keep you updated with.
Okay, then, thank you very much indeed. Now, appeals. Rebecca, could you update us on appeals, please?
Well, in terms of an update, there's the list that's usually provided on the agenda of decisions that we've received and those that we're awaiting decisions on. If members have got any questions on any particular appeal, if you can come to me and then I can or email me and then I can get you some more detailed information. But just for note going forward, I think we are looking or are working on improving the look of this report and maybe giving some more information. So I will be in touch to see the kind of information that you'd like to see and hopefully present something that's a bit more useful and contains some more information for members going forward.
Can you give us some indication of the speed with which appeals are being dealt with? There seems to be quite a long backlog, but I don't know how much the delay is.
The delay, unfortunately, is with PINs, and the planning inspectorate have got significant delays. I couldn't give you an exact time frame, unfortunately, but yet we're experiencing delays from the planning inspectorate.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you very much. Now, we now finished the business for today. The next meeting will be on Wednesday, the 11th of October. And thank you all for attending. Goodbye.
Thank you, Chair.